Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Hello and welcome to Aggressive Negotiations, coming at you from Dex's Diner. So I apologize about the music. It might not be our choice, but we're having a cup of Java juice. And with me, as he is every single week, the one, the only, the brilliant, the beautiful Jedi Master, John Mills.
You know, it's funny because my mother always said that about me, and you've just confirmed everything. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. You know what? Honestly, I'm pleased with the music selection at Dex's Diner. I really, truly am. I enjoy it.
It's better than Oga's.
But it sure is. But I also, I really enjoy the bantha steaks here. Those are a really positive, good thing. Although I do want to, just before we go forward with today's topic, which you're going to lead us in, I always, Jawa juice, what I love about the Jawas is everything that we've gotten since the original Star Wars. The Jawas are one of the most interesting species because they're everywhere. They are everywhere.
It's true. They're
everywhere. Like, I would love to find out even more about them because they are just ubiquitous. And it's like, what's it take to be ubiquitous in the Star Wars galaxy? I mean, humans are everywhere too, but, like Jawas are everywhere. It's such a very specific thing. I just think it's cool. Anyway, off my
I gotta say too,
soapbox,
is Dex's Ronto wrap is delicious. It's so good.
It's the sauce on the slaw. That's really what makes it.
Anyway, well, as you can tell, I've got Ronto wrap on the mind. But as we're thinking about that, we would encourage you to follow us over on social media. So we're at the Jedi Masters on Twitter. We'd love for you to check us out. And, of course, we got the entire network at Join Nerd Party. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. Got the website, thenerdparty.com. We're on Instagram at The Nerd Party. All of these places we'd love for you to check out and see what else we've got going on in the network, because we don't just do Star Wars. We cover pretty much everything. If you're on a platform like Apple Podcasts or maybe Spotify where they let you review or rate podcasts, help us out. Give us a rating. We'd really appreciate it. And or a written review like over there on Apple Podcasts to help this show grow. So I was thinking of, because my wife and I were rewatching Attack of the Clones. It's its 20th anniversary this year. Of course, you got to watch the movie. And I was really just thinking about how that movie creates a pivot point for the character of Obi-Wan, in the sense is that legitimately at that moment in that movie, his life will never be the same. Like, that we set him on a path to basically lose everything. And it's going to be a slow and arduous process for him, but he's going to lose the Republic. He's going to lose the love of his life. He's going to lose his family, the Jedi. And he's going to lose his best friend.
Yes.
Did I miss anything?
Well, he's going to lose Dex's Diner, too.
This is true.
Never going to be able to go there again.
Yep.
Which, honestly, what's the bigger tragedy? We can put a poll up there online and find out. Yes. It's interesting. I've never really thought of it that way, but Obi-Wan really is the character through which the true loss of the Republic can be seen, right? Because Yoda's so old, we know he's seen change over time, right? Yeah. He's seen stuff come and go, and he's already got, by the time we meet him in Phantom Menace, that larger view of life where it's like, things happen, right? Which isn't to say that Yoda doesn't regret certain things and all of that stuff, but Obi-Wan really does come into that tragic arc. I agree. I hadn't really considered it from that angle. And what's interesting is Phantom Menace is that one where he's a kid and he's still the idealist and he's still got his whole life ahead of him. And Attack of the Clones is the moment where the more somber Obi-Wan is born. And I would even venture to say that what people don't give enough credit to for the writing as well as the performance from Ewan McGregor is that that's really the moment where you lose the distinction between the Ewan McGregor Obi-Wan and the Alec Guinness Obi-Wan. They suddenly become the same person by the end of Attack of the Clones. And I think that's very interesting. And then, of course, the Clone Wars just sort of like moves him further on the path. But what, do you agree with that? Do you agree that you lose the distinction between Ewan McGregor and Alec Guinness? Or do you think that, McGregor still had a ways to go and hits it in Revenge of the Sith instead?
I had never even considered that, but as I'm thinking through the most recent rewatch of the movie, I really do see a lot of that coming in much more into the performance. Especially I'm thinking of the scene where he's hanging there and you've got Dooku talking to him, and just even the way he's answering is kind of, I don't know. It just seems so much more. There's such a maturity there from the character, and it really feels as though Ewan had spent time kind of studying Guinness so he could be closer, because he's grown up 10 years as a character by this point, even though for his life it's only been 3, and so.
And you know what? I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's another thing about his performance that people need to recognize is when he's cast as Obi-Wan, he's essentially still a kid.
Yeah, he's very young.
No offense to anybody who's still in their 20s or anything like that. But, trust me, I look back and I'm like, oh, the 20s, that was so long ago. But with the fact that he's able to portray 10 years worth of age, only 3 years later, is an incredible testament to Ewan McGregor. Like picking up the mannerisms. I believe he's old. I believe he's aged by the time I see him. Whereas,
yes.
I've known people for 5 years, and I wouldn't think that they've aged 10, just because I've known them, and it doesn't seem as marked. So you do have to give him a fair amount of credit. I mean, Hayden Christensen gets a leg up because he's a completely different actor. So you buy that one a lot easier. But yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, that he pulls that off. But it's, you mentioned him talking to Dooku, and what I want to ask, because I'm a big champion for the fact that people tend to overlook Dooku and they should give him a little more credence. Do you think that some of our understanding of Obi-Wan even comes through the character of Dooku, even just in Attack of the Clones, of where Obi-Wan could have gone with his spent idealism? Because what is Dooku but a dark version of Obi-Wan? Older, bitter, angry that things didn't go the way they were supposed to. His reaction to the death of Qui-Gon is to straight up just leave the Order and then follow the Sith. And Obi-Wan goes through a lot of traumatic stuff and doesn't go down that path. Do you think that Dooku helps us understand Obi-Wan even a little bit better?
The connection between all of these characters of Yoda, Qui-Gon, Dooku, and Obi-Wan, there's this chain of development. And it is interesting, like you said, that Dooku is kind of more of an outsider, a bit like Qui-Gon, and he's somebody who takes that outsiderness to the extreme by then working to destroy what he could have helped correct if Sidious hadn't gotten his hooks into him. And there's something that is really interesting to me about the idea of what you said, those two characters together, and that they are mirrors for one another. And a dark reflection. It's really interesting.
And that gets us on a path, because we actually received an email recently from a listener, and I'll just use the first name Joey because I don't want to, I didn't ask permission to use your name before we spoke here on the show. But I haven't read Brotherhood yet. But in light of what you just said about that Jedi family tree, he calls it out specifically about the pattern in this certain Jedi family tree. And he traces through Yoda, Dooku, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and how it's sort of how they have that line of greatest failure, except Obi-Wan and Ahsoka are the exceptions to the rule. Yoda trains Dooku. Dooku becomes a Sith Lord. Dooku trains Qui-Gon, and he's unable to get on the council because he defies them all the time, and he follows sort of a different path. And Obi-Wan and Ahsoka are the ones that seem to go closer to the true path. Now, Obi-Wan winds up, of course, having the failure of Anakin around his neck and everything like that. But I think that is an interesting thing. And so, a thank you to Joey for sharing that insight. But does Brotherhood reinforce this? Like, I want to read the book, but I haven't yet.
So there's a great line in there where one of the characters observes that Obi-Wan Kenobi is a person who is too good for a galaxy at war. There is this idealism in him, and it's interesting, and because I was thinking about that book and the movie and everything that happens in between with the Clone Wars, and what you see is Obi-Wan's idealism, I think, slowly get chipped away, but he never stops believing that by doing the right thing, you can correct course for the Republic, that we can fix this, right? And I think that's the real strength, and I think that's going to be the thing that as we kind of look towards, Kenobi, I think one of the things about the Obi-Wan Kenobi show is that we know he's a broken character there, which I appreciate that we are going to actually see him be that broken man who is going to have to find a way to have that fire reignited in him by the time we see him again in Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes that story worth telling, because you do have a character who used to probably be one of the most pragmatically idealistic characters in Star Wars. And by the end of the Clone Wars, because of everything that's happened to him, as I mentioned at the beginning, all that he's lost, he's shattered. It's like, Mace Windu got a hold of him and hit every shatter point, right?
Right.
And so I think that's fascinating to me to kind of be at that place, because how that character then finds a way to either rebuild himself or to be encouraged to rebuild himself into what we're going to see is going to be, I think, a really cool story. And it all starts with those moments like in Attack of the Clones, where Obi-Wan is kind of, I think, thrown into a world where he realizes things are much darker and grittier and awful than he might have thought possible before. Like that, I think he begins to see that there is a lot that the Jedi have been missing, and that was just the first crack of the door, and then the rest of the Clone Wars happens.
Yes. And I think that my hope with the Kenobi show, of course, and I've said this repeatedly, is that he, his belief that finally gets broken, and I think this would be supported by your idea that he always believes that doing the right thing up to a certain point will still yield positive results. I'm really hoping that he tries to convert Vader one more time, because by the time we get to Star Wars, the original, and then especially when he's talking with Luke in Return of the Jedi, this is a guy who has just let go of any of that, right? He's more machine now than man. He's twisted and evil. Like, Obi-Wan isn't hopeful at all anymore. And the thing is, the one curveball I want to throw is the Kenobi series takes place before his final confrontation with Maul.
Mm-hmm.
What role, how do you feel Maul has helped us understand Obi-Wan? Like, given what you've been saying, right? Like, how key has Maul been throughout this story to be a foil for Obi-Wan? Like, how key is that for you? Do you think that we understand Obi-Wan as well as we do without Maul.
The beauty of that episode of Rebels was that it gave us a clear picture of just how much Obi-Wan had grown as a character by that point and how much Maul had not. And so what we see there is by that point, Obi-Wan has found a way to not only rebuild himself in his hope, but maybe to be an even better version of himself than was possible if he hadn't gone through such a horrible time. You know, like when I think of the wisdom of that character in that episode as he's talking to Ezra, as he's talking to Maul, the forgiveness that he offers Maul at the end, it's actually a representation almost of, and a nice play off of what we'll see Luke do with Anakin at the end.
That's a great point because I agree with you. And what I think is interesting is that he does offer that forgiveness, if you will, for Maul at the end. And does it layer an additional understanding of Obi-Wan? Because my take always has been he's basically given up on the idea of good being in Vader anymore. He's just let go of that by the time we get to Star Wars. But his willingness to offer, for lack of a better term, absolution to Maul on the way out the door, it seems to complicate that so much because you've got this other relationship that's happening, you know, with Maul and with Vader, and it's just an interesting juxtaposition. And does it give a little more depth to how he's viewing Vader when we see him as an old man when Luke comes onto the scene?
And I do wonder if the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and you mentioned this, and you've talked about this many times, where you're really hoping that you have that confrontation. He's trying to bring him back, and it goes horribly wrong, basically, in the sense that Obi-Wan does feel like, no, this is never going to happen. I think one of the things that would make it different with Maul is that Maul is a broken character. And I think Obi-Wan realizes the brokenness of the character in front of him, and yet at the same time, he's going to do justice at that moment. As the Jedi, he is going to bring justice, and regardless of where Maul is, you know, kind of in his place, and I think even in his brokenness, Maul is still an angry, violent person who could continue to wreak havoc on the galaxy. And
no, but so I'm sorry to cut you off, but Maul. Here's the difference. Here's why Obi-Wan's view. I think you're hitting on it here. Here's why Obi-Wan's view of Maul is different than Vader. Is Vader had a different path than Maul did. Vader's path essentially was Dooku's, and Dooku was a traitor, and Dooku gave up the good stuff, whereas Maul didn't have a shot. He was
that's very true. Yep.
Raised on Dathomir, picked for evil, twisted. It's not like he had a good life and then he decided to betray everybody and slaughter everyone. Like there's just that different trajectory. I think you hit on it right there.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point. And it is fascinating because you think about it. You know, Maul didn't have a choice, and in the end, Obi-Wan didn't necessarily have a choice, right? I mean, he's brought to the temple as a child. You know, he doesn't remember his family. But it kind of. It goes to talk about the nature versus nurture type of thing, you know,
right.
Which is interesting because, you know, as we're talking about grace, I made a joke earlier because we've been kind of talking back and forth a little bit behind the scenes just about Republic drug laws.
Yes.
And then there's that moment in the bar at the Outrider Club where he says, you know, you don't want to sell me death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life. He's offering grace to that character.
Right. He's not reporting him to the cops.
Exactly.
He's encouraging him to go and change his ways.
And this is, it's played as a funny scene, but it's also a trait of Obi-Wan Kenobi to offer grace to people. And so I think you rightly hit on then why with Vader later it will be different than it was for Maul. There's no room for grace because of where those two characters are and who they are and why they've chosen what they've chosen. All of those things play into it. And, especially at that moment, 10 years later in the Kenobi series, I don't think Anakin regrets his decision. I think he's in the middle of that fuel-raged,
oh, yeah.
I hate everything. I want to destroy everything. And, when that is your MO, I mean, the dark side clearly has him at that point. And it looks to forever dominate his destiny.
Yeah, and there's, I think that there's such an interesting moment here, just like frozen in time too, because again, hitting on this same point though, I think this is why the Clone Wars is such a key series overall, is because Obi-Wan literally suffers the thing Anakin fears most, the loss of the woman who loves him and always will. And he, Obi-Wan makes the right choice. We've talked about this in the past, in past episodes and everything about the contrast between the choices. But Obi-Wan literally holds in his arms the woman who meant more to him, almost meant more to him than the Jedi.
Yeah.
And Anakin is motivated simply by fear of that moment. And I could understand why Obi-Wan would even be a little less inclined to offer grace, to say, I actually suffered the thing that you were afraid of, and I showed you how to deal with it, how to carry on and still be a decent person. And you, like, in a sense, not in a Sith sort of way, I guess, but you can understand that sort of underlying anger that Obi-Wan might have, and because it's an anger that I think is familiar to anybody who looks at someone who takes the same situation and turns it into an excuse to do bad, and you're like, wait a minute, I went through this too. You don't have, this doesn't give you a license to be this way, sort of thing. So that, I guess that's it.
Yeah,
that's
this doesn't give you a license to kill.
Right. Well, honestly, considering that's one of the worst James Bond movies, nothing should.
I don't know what you're talking about. That's an excellent James Bond movie. You be quiet.
It is not. It is
an excellent James Bond movie.
No.
I mean, it's okay. It's not the first time that you've been wrong. It'll probably not be the last time that you'll be wrong. It's understandable.
You'll find that being wrong about James Bond movies, Matt, depends greatly upon one's own point of view. Mm-hmm. Hey,
yep,
there you
that's
go.
What they all
Bringing
say.
it home with the Obi-Wan line.
I think it really is interesting because, and I think you rightly called it out, how much the Clone Wars helps here. But I think one of the beautiful things about the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi, with all 6 films, you really did have a character who had a lot happen to him. And really, it gave you the opportunity to kind of experience all the worst things with a character. And then the Clone Wars comes in and it just like takes that and it brings it to like a 15, Yeah. And I think that's the thing that I'm loving about the way these series are adding to the story that we love, and they're just continuing to add another layer, right? Like it's like they've been baking a cake and it's been delicious, but then they just add another layer and it's even better. It's like, I think it's just, I love it. I mean, I just, and it's one of the things I think I'm most excited for with the series, because one of the things that we've talked about many times with our friend Nick is the idea that Star Wars needs to have a why for its story.
Yes.
And I think why I'm hopeful as Kenobi comes out is that we have a really good why to do this show. And it's not just like, oh, because, X-Wings are cool. It's because this character can be benefited by seeing this part of his story.
Right. To take your cake metaphor, this is the icing we've all been waiting for. We've all wondered what this moment in time is like for Obi-Wan. And I applaud Deborah Chow for being willing to take on the challenge because the expectations for this show have got to be ridiculous for so many people. It's so difficult to go into it and say, you know what? It's just a show. It's going to be good. It's going to be bad. Like you know the mantra, like no matter what, it's simply a piece of entertainment. But this feels like something where the stakes for enjoyment are high enough that I can imagine if I were in her position, developing an ulcer from second guessing myself all the time, being like, is this what people want? Is this what people want? But sort of to close it out, right? Since, it seems right to close it out with, we haven't seen anything besides the trailers as we're recording this. We don't know what's specifically going to happen. Given your own love for Kenobi as a character, well known, he's your favorite character in Star Wars, right? Yes. Fair to say.
Absolutely.
Is there a way that you can consider that this 6-episode series will scratch that itch one final time and you will consider the book of Obi-Wan Kenobi closed? Right? Are you willing to accept this the possibility that this show closes his chapter for good and we move on from the character? Or is it always you're going to want more stories with Obi-Wan?
On screen, that may kind of close out the series. I mean, I think Ewan said, I think somewhere, that there's a possibility that he might do something else, if the storyline was good enough, right? But this feels like the swan song for the character in that. I think the other place that would be great to see him, though, is in animation or literature. This is the place where having a story with, say, him and Qui-Gon as, master and apprentice, and I would love to see, I think it'd be phenomenal to have more books, animated. I mean, whatever you want to do there, I think that would be fantastic. Those are the type of stories I think that are rife for the taking with this character at this point. And I can't really imagine that there wouldn't be people that would be excited about having more of that, right? So those are the type of places where I think at this point, that's where we'd be getting more of, this character. And I don't know. What about you? Does this feel like this is the spot where we kind of give this character his final battle with, not really final battle because
of course.
So, but you know what
I do. I think that, again, to give it the same qualifier you did, I think that on screen this could be the fitting closeout to the Obi-Wan chapter of the story. This could be that fitting, I've got the whole picture sort of thing. I would never reject anything that Lucasfilm Animation rolled out to me on any circumstances. Lucasfilm Animation could be like, hey, we're doing the story of, to reference somebody you talked about earlier, Evan Sleaze-Baggio. I was like, okay, Lucasfilm Animation, show me what you can do. But I do think that on screen, I can probably let go of Obi-Wan at this point. Because this is ever since you found out about the time period between the fall of the Republic and the original Star Wars, it's always been in your brain. What was Obi-Wan like, and what was he doing during this time period? And the trailers have made this feel epic enough to think, I don't know how many other stories I care about outside of him running across Vader's path one more time, having that discussion with Owen, and him figuring out how to survive in hiding without giving himself away, sort of thing. So I think like this is that final piece. This is that piece of the puzzle I've been dying to find that fell under the table, and I've been looking for it for years. So that would be my take on it too.
Yeah, and I think in the end, it's one of those things where, we've just been waiting for so long, and it's finally here. And, I think it's cool because, this truly just is a character that has just meant so much to all of us. I know he's not your favorite, but
now,
I don't think there's anybody who's a Star Wars fan where Obi-Wan Kenobi isn't a character that means something to them.
Let's make no bones about this. He may not be my favorite character, like definitive favorite character sort of thing, the way he is for you. But growing up with Star Wars my entire life, never having a conscious existence without Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi is what sells that first movie. Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi is why you buy it. It really is.
Yeah.
There's a reason he got a Best Supporting Actor nomination at the Oscars for the role. It's a terrible injustice that he didn't win it, because that's just nonsense. Because anybody who wins a Best, Actor or Best Actress award is the type of person, I think, in my own philosophies, if you subtracted them and their performance from the movie, it's less for it. And I can honestly say that Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi is one of the key pieces of Star Wars' success. Why it's not just like a Top Gun, where it's like, oh yeah, it was a fun adventure movie, and instead, wow, this movie spoke to me on a certain level. And part of that's Lucas's writing. Part of that is the ghost writing from Huck and Katz. Part of that is Alec Guinness's performance, and it all comes together in an incredible way. So I didn't mean to go on a rant, but it's one of those things where it's like, no, I know he's not my favorite character, but Star Wars is Obi-Wan Kenobi as much as it's Anakin Skywalker or Luke Skywalker. Yeah, to me,
it's a great point. No, and I think, as you say that, it's the reason why, obviously, the moment Disney purchased Lucasfilm, fans kind of immediately started clamoring for Kenobi. I mean, it's been a drumbeat, and so you're absolutely right that this character is just as important as those other characters you mentioned.
Let me ask you a question. Would Disney have served itself and its success better if, instead of making a sequel trilogy, instead made like a Kenobi movie and let's just say Rogue One and Solo, instead of trying to make a continuation of the Skywalker, like figure out their footing, make these things? Would you have rather them do that, or are you grateful for the fact that instead the streaming revolution happened so that we can get 6 episodes?
I think that if they had gone that direction, it probably would have been great. Now, my hope is, though, that I see the show and I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't have wanted anything else,
Yeah.
So, but when I think of that lineup of doing Obi-Wan Kenobi, Rogue One, Solo, I'm like, that seems like a pretty good lineup.
Would have been pretty good, wouldn't it? And
I wouldn't. Yeah.
Well, and if you think about it, if they'd followed that sort of thing, there wouldn't have been the trilogy weight around their neck. It would have been each movie being a one-off.
Yeah.
So even if
Yep.
you weren't nuts
Yep.
about it, it's like, you know, you just sort of like pick up and move on. There isn't that same
Yep.
sort of
Yeah.
expectation, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and it's so cool. Again, like, there are very few characters that we have this much detail about in the series, you know, and have watched go through this many things. And what's beautiful is that most of the characters that we do, when you know, really they're prequel characters.
Yep.
You know, and so, and those prequel characters that started in the original series. So you've got your Anakins, you know, and your Obi-Wan Kenobis, and those are the biggest. And then the prequel series added in all these other characters that we just found out so much about. So, you know, it's phenomenal. And yeah, really excited to celebrate with fans with this show. But John, if anybody wants to catch up with you and share some of their favorite Obi-Wan moments or something like that, where can they find you?
Just look for Kessel Junkie out there online, KESSELJUNKIE. If you think I have anything worth listening to outside of these wonderful conversations I have with Matt, you might want to join me over on House Lights, which is a podcast here on the Nerd Party Network, where we look at the work of directors through all sorts of zany lenses that we come up with. We have a lot of fun with it. So that's where you can find me. And, you know, honestly, with the low prices on crypto, maybe you'll find me out there. But where can people find you online, Matt?
Well, when I'm not shopping for Kessel Coin, you can find me all over social media under the name MattRushing02. So Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero, any of those type of places. Of course, here on the network, I have a completed show I did with Drake Hoffman called Owl Posts. We talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. Over on the TFM network, the 602 Club, where we're talking every fandom we love. Star Wars is one of them. There's a ton of Star Wars shows over there. John is there many times with me. In fact, he's in bonus shows like Snyder Cuts and Assembling Avengers. So check all of that out. You can also find me doing Literary Treks, The Orb, Warp 5, The Artificial Tango, and Saddle Up. Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek. Warp 5 is about Star Trek Enterprise. The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The Artificial Tango is Star Trek Picard. And Saddle Up is about Strange New Worlds. But John, you know, I'm feeling the need for a Ronto rap, so I hear that I don't know, maybe it's just time we go back to the temple and close negotiations.
You know what? I have a fuzzy tauntaun waiting on the mantle for me, so I think that negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.